Britain decides fate. Britain goes to vote with Brexit on the horizon.
First at 9. This is Other Derana 24/7.
Qatar in crisis. As hostilities continue, Qatar says will not surrender. In Sri Lanka, Poson Festival, President says commit yourself to make a better world. Derana Media Network organizes Derana Abhivandana at Ruan Valley Mahasaya. Administrative changes. 10 new ministerial secretaries appointed. In sports headlines, Champions Trophy, Sri Lanka chasing 322 for victory over India. Amidst terrorist attacks and complex Brexit negotiations on the horizon, polls opened in Britain today in a national election which could be tighter than predicted. I'm Indira Yamuatta and we begin our broadcast with developments from across the world. And in the United Kingdom, British Prime Minister Theresa May called the snap election in a bid to strengthen her hand in negotiations on Britain's exit from the European Union and to boost her Conservative Party's majority in Parliament. A handful of seats are expected to be declared by midnight local time, with the final results expected tomorrow afternoon.
Voting in the UK general election is underway at more than 40,000 polling stations across the country. Polls opened at 7 a.m. British Standard Time today, with counting to commence once voting ends at 10 p.m. A total of 650 Westminster MPs will be elected, with about 46.9 million people registered to vote. Some votes have already been cast through postal voting, which accounted for 16.4% of the total electorate at the 2015 general election. Police have increased security at polling stations, including patrols by armed officers in some areas following the recent terror attacks. To form a majority in the House of Commons, one party must win 326 seats. Prime Minister Theresa May, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon were seen casting their votes today. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she expects negotiations on Britain's departure from the European Union to begin shortly after the country's parliamentary elections.
The
decision to leave the EU has been taken, and we are working on the basis of what Prime Minister Theresa May wrote to us on behalf of the British government. The guidance is oriented on that letter. I think the negotiations will begin soon after the elections.
Meanwhile, some Asian markets wobbled today as investors braced for any surprise from the UK election. Japan's Nikkei share average gave up early gains to close lower as the yen rose in the global market. May's gamble to call snap elections 3 years before it was due may have misfired, because in the wake of the recent terror attacks in Manchester and London, the Tories' lead over Labour has narrowed in the polls. Before the election, the Conservatives held 330 seats, Labour held 229, the Scottish National Party 54 and the Lib Dems 9. The major political parties have all published their manifesto in the build-up to the election, with Theresa May promising a mainstream government that will deliver for mainstream Britain, and Labour's Jeremy Corbyn pledging to raise the income tax rate for earnings over 80,000 and 123,000. The Liberal Democrats leader Tim Farron has promised a second EU referendum, and the Scottish National Party unveiled their own manifesto calling for a Scottish referendum at the end of the Brexit process. Commenting on the impact of UK elections on Sri Lanka, former Foreign Affairs Minister Rohita Bogollagama emphasised that despite a possible government change in UK, Sri Lanka must continue to have strong bilateral relation in terms of trade platforms.
I think UK is a known country for us, whatever government that comes in. Our pursuit with UK is more in terms of traditional ties, which we value, and also in terms of economic advances that we can make between the two countries, because they are a good trading partner to have. 35% of our apparel exports go into the UK. Now that we are not going to be part of the EU, and the GSP concessions are not going to be of much benefit because of the EU going to cease being part of the EU as well. So we have to have a very strong bilateral relationship with whatever government that comes in the UK and get on to a strong trade platform between the two countries.
And from the developments from the Qatar crisis, with Qatar being isolated by several Gulf nations and the country plunging into a crisis with people thronging supermarkets, panic buying food, Qatar Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani says it is not ready to change its foreign policy to resolve a dispute with fellow Gulf Arab states and will never surrender. Meanwhile, UAE's foreign minister stated that further measures against Qatar were possible and warned the country against allowing Shiite Muslim power Iran to exploit an unprecedented rift which has arisen between the mainly Sunni Muslim Gulf Arab states, some of which regard Tehran as a regional arch-rival. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain severed diplomatic relations with Qatar in a coordinated move on Monday, accusing it of backing Islamist militants and Iran.
The United Arab Emirates threatened to impose an economic embargo against Qatar, while Bahrain said any options were on the table as the crisis in the Gulf showed no signs of abating.
What we're hoping is that our action will actually, send, some sense into the decision makers in Qatar, where they would come and see that their overall interest is not in undermining their neighbors, but in supporting their neighbors and working with them. We hope that cooler heads will prevail, wiser heads will prevail, and we will not get to that.
Meanwhile, moves by Saudi Arabia, Egypt and other Arab states to isolate Qatar may have serious repercussions for Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist movement that rules Gaza and has long relied on the Gulf Emirate for financial and political support. Qatar has paid out or pledged $1.5 billion since 2012 to help build roads, houses, schools and clinics in impoverished Gaza. If financial aid is cut, it will hurt Gaza's 2 million people and could have ramifications for Israel as well.
We are surprised at the Hamas movement receiving such at this time. A statement against the Hamas movement, pushing some countries and sides to boycott it and siege it during a time that Hamas proves to everyone that it is committed to its national cause, does not interfere with other issues, fights against the occupation and is focusing on liberation of Jerusalem.
Meanwhile, Qataris will no longer be allowed to land at any airport in the United Arab Emirates or catch connecting flights there as part of increased efforts by Arab powers to isolate the Gulf state. Abu Dhabi-owned Etihad also said foreigners living in Qatar with residence permits would no longer be eligible for visas upon arrival in the United Arab Emirates. Speaking to Other Derana, Research Associate of Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies, George Cook says relationship with Qatar and Sri Lanka will remain unchanged due to strong links between the two countries.
As is the case with lots of other countries who have a direct link with Qatar, especially given our domestic workers or the massive numbers that we have residing in Qatar at the moment. For the durable future, for the foreseeable future, we're going to see relations continuing the way they are. Because Qatar is a country, we need to realize, is one that has planned a very strategically for the future. Because at the moment, it's all knee-jerk reactions. Countries are stopping their airspace being used, there's several diplomatic ties. This is all action being taken, and now there's even talk about economic embargoes on Qatar. But then once such decisions are made, one thing that we see is when you try to isolate countries only get stronger.
Meanwhile, in the United States, former FBI Director James Comey is set to testify later today before the Senate Intelligence Committee on whether President Donald Trump pressed him to end a probe into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's contacts with Russia. Prior to the much-anticipated hearing, screenshots of Comey's pre-written testimony was posted on the Senate Intelligence Committee's website.
James Comey, in his testimony, accuses Trump of trying to get him to water down the FBI's investigation into Russia's alleged interference in the 2016 US presidential election. Comey goes on to say Trump told him at a dinner in January, a week after the president took office, that "I need loyalty, I expect loyalty." Meanwhile, Democratic representatives announced their plans to file articles of impeachment for the president, claiming he obstructed justice.
In Myanmar, meanwhile, the wreckage as well as bodies of passengers of the military plane which disappeared yesterday with 122 people were discovered today, extinguishing any hope for survivors. Navy and civilian ships earlier today discovered parts of the wreckage and 10 bodies, 6 adults and 4 children, 35 kilometers off the southern coastal town of Langlun. An airport wheel, 2 life jackets and some bags with clothes believed to be from the missing plane were found earlier in the search. And today is the day of Poson full moon Poya, which carries great significance since the Arhat Mahinda Thera arrived in Sri Lanka with the sacred word of the Lord Buddha on a similar day. President Maithripala Sirisena and other leaders shared their thoughts in lieu of the sacred day, urging them to celebrate it with meaning.
The Sadham Yatra series of Dhamma sermons held under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena on every Poya day, centering a prominent temple in the country, was conducted for the 26th occasion. The Dham Sabha Mandapya was held at the premises of historical Madirigiriya Watadagya in Polonnaruwa. In the meantime, the Bandaranayaka Siranayaka Poson Rice Dansala, organized by the Polonnaruwa Buddhist Association, was held by the Parakrama Samudra today under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena. A large number of devotees who visited Polonnaruwa for Poson Poya visited the Dansala, and the President also joined in serving. Pulatisi Posun Udanya, the exposition of sacred relics in Polonnaruwa Galviharaya, was also conducted under the patronage of President Sirisena this afternoon. The exposition is organized in remembrance of whose lives were claimed by the recent disaster in the country. Meanwhile, releasing a special message for the Poson Full Moon Poya Day, President Maithripala Sirisena says our determination on the noble Poson Poya Day should be to commit ourselves to make a better world through the discipline of mind, body and word. In his Poson Poya Day message, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says that we should enrich our lives with the core of Buddhist philosophy to contribute the aim of taking Buddhism to the world. Issuing a communique for the Poson Full Moon Poya Day, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa says that Sri Lankans should respectfully remember Arahat Mahinda for delivering the gift of Dhamma to the country and should be determined to live their lives in accordance with Dhamma.
And people across the country took part in celebrations and religious observances organized in lieu of the day of Poson Poya. Dansals, which see the participation of all religious and ethnic groups, took place across the country, while Poson pandals were also seen in plenty every city of the country.
History tells us when Arahat Mahinda arrived at the Mihintale mountain, King Devanampiyatissa was on a deer hunt in the forest at the foot of the mountain. Arahat Mahinda called the king by his first name and asked several riddles regarding a mango tree. Impressed by the nature of the questions, King Devanampiyatissa listened to his teachings and started following the words of the Lord Buddha. The king thereafter declared Sri Lanka a Buddhist nation, and a number of relatives and friends converted to Buddhism and even entered the Sasana. It is the time which is considered when Sri Lanka was brought out of darkness and into light. The Sri Lankan Buddhist culture then sprang with the Buddhist teachings and philosophy, paving way to a broad alley of archaeological wonders. In celebration of the day, Dansal were seen springing up in cities with hundreds of people lining up to partake, all in the spirit of giving and sharing. A private bus was deployed in Kandy which travelled throughout the day from Teldeniya to Kandy for free of charge. In the meantime, a procession featuring the ancient Sri Lankan martial art of Angampura also took place in Hambantota. Religious observances were conducted across the country, including Mihin Talava, Jayashree Mahabodhiya in Anuradhapura and in the Mutiyangana Raja Mahaviharaya as part of the rituals of the festival.
In the meantime, celebrating the Poson Full Moon Poya Day, Derana Media Network organised Derana Abhivandana Poson Poya Day program in Anuradhapura, Ruwanveli Mahasaya today. The program included a number of events participated by a large number of Buddhist devotees.
Derana Abhivandana, organised by Derana Media Network, commenced by 5 this morning at the Anuradhapura Ruwanveli Mahasaya. The Poya Dhamma sermon was delivered by Venerable Madagoda Abhayatissa Thera. A Buddha Puja was also held in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Derana Abhivandana Poson Zone commenced yesterday in Anuradhapura, Sarananda Viharaya, Jayanti Viharaya, Sama Viharaya and Sandahiru Saya. A number of events including Dana, Sila and meditation programs and Dansals, Lantern and Bhakti Gi events were organised at the premises. A program to make the Atamasthana Sands garbage commenced this morning to educate the devotees in the Anuradhapura sacred grounds. The program, organised by the Derana Media Network and the Central Environmental Authority, will recommence tomorrow at 9 in the morning. Another program organised by the Derana Media Network, Sri Lanka Police and the Anuradhapura Municipal Council to educate the devotees on the Atamasthana was also worked off and it will recommence tomorrow.
The National Building Research Organisation says 3-storied buildings which collapsed in Ginigathena yesterday morning was due to lack of standards in its construction. NBRO officials visited the site and conducted research last evening.
A 3-storied private building along the Colombo-Hatton Main Road collapsed yesterday. Following tests by the NBRO, geologist Samantha Bogapitiya confirmed that the cause of collapse is not heavy rainfall. Meanwhile, 4 landslides were reported in Kajugaswata village in Ahalyagoda due to heavy rainfall. With the threat of landslides in Kajugaswata, the 72 families were provided residence at the Marebe temple.
There were 4 landslides in the area. We are afraid to stay at home at night. No one came to inquire about us.
The authorities have taken action to evacuate 12 families in Naboda area due to the landslide of Digalakanda Naboda Kalutara. 42 people belonging to 12 families are residing at St. Anthony's Church, Naboda Kalutara.
We are not moving back again until we get a house and a land. There is no point of going back.
Meanwhile, discussions were held in the Divisional Secretariat, Kalutara, to provide compensation for the affected people.
I propose to transfer money to an existing account or opening a new account. This was implemented during the tsunami time. It is a simple process. Therefore, they can withdraw money whenever they want. But issues arise when collecting money from different tiers. Although the provisions are already allocated, they are not receiving it yet.
President Maithripala Sirisena appointed new secretaries for 10 ministries today. They received their letters of appointment at the President's official residence last evening.
Accordingly, Udaya R. Seniviratna was appointed as the new secretary to the Ministry of Health, Nutrition and Indigenous Medicine, while Upali Marasinghe was appointed to the Ministry of Petroleum Resources Development. Anura Dissanayake has been appointed as the new secretary to the Ministry of Mahavalley Development and Environment, while Jayanta Wijayaratne will take over at the Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resource Management. S.A.N. Saranatissa was appointed as the new secretary of the Ministry of Labour, Trade, Union Relations and Sabragamo Development, which Shirani Veerakun appointed Secretary to the Ministry of Science, Technology and Research. Meanwhile, L.D. Senanayaka is the new Secretary to the Ministry of Development Activities. APG Kitsiri, G.S. Vithanage and J.A. Ranjit received their new appointment as Secretaries to the Ministries of Regional Development, Transport and Civil Aviation and Plantation Industries respectively.
And Chief Minister of the Northern Province C.V. Vigneswaran says that action will be taken against provincial ministers who have violated their mandate. He made the comment after attending the 95th session of the Northern Provincial Council yesterday.
Many matters stated by the commissioners which inquired rights and privileges and functions of the Northern Provincial Council generally, and with regard to the manner in which they have found the ministers having gone beyond their area of behavior. And once these matters are made available to us, then I would, as the Chief Minister, make a decision as to what should be done with regard to the ministers who have been found guilty of certain lapses on their part.
Popular singer Prince Uday Priyantha passed away this morning at a private hospital in Colombo while undergoing treatment. He was at the age of 47 at the time of passing away.
Prince Uday Priyantha was a famous Sri Lankan artist who entered the music field in the 1990s representing the National Youth Services Council. He has composed and performed a wide range of songs and gained recognition through his debut song Sandarenu Vahina. He once held the record for most sales in 1991 during an era when audio cassettes were popular. With approximately 500 songs against his name, Prince Uday Priyantha was a pioneer of the local music style which emerged in the 90s. Despite most of his songs being based on love, affection and separation, Uday Priyantha, however, was a bachelor and was looked after by his sister during his last years. Almost a month ago, he participated in a television program, Malbara Derana. He was ailing for a while and was under treatment. Various artists as well as TV Derana came together to address his financial difficulties and collected funds towards his treatment. Prince Uday Priyantha bade farewell this morning to all at a private hospital in Colombo, plunging many a heart into sorrow.
In your top business story, Fitch Ratings is of the view that Sri Lankan banks will likely come under increased capital pressure from Basel III related requirements that take full effect at the beginning of 2019. Fitch expects most banks will have to raise capital to meet the higher requirement, particularly if they're pursuing rapid growth. The rating agency's negative outlook on the Sri Lankan banking sector reflects pressures emanating due to the sector's capital needs worsening by deteriorating asset quality following aggressive lending during the 2015-2016 financial year, effects of the recent floods and weak internal capital generation. Capitalization is thin at state banks due to substantial dividend payouts in 2016. The three largest state banks, National Savings Bank, Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank, paid 76% of their profits as dividends. Fitch says their capital levels are vulnerable to dividend demands from the state and continued high payouts in the absence of capital infusions could leave them struggling to meet regulatory capital requirements. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka issued the new local capital requirements related to the global Basel III regulatory framework late last year. Deputy Minister of Plantation Industries Vasantha Perera says the ministry has decided to compensate small-scale tea plantations that have been affected by the recent floods and landslides. The ministry is currently conducting a preliminary assessment on damages incurred in order to finalize the monetary compensation which will be given to those affected.
The Sri Lanka Tea Board revealed that the tea industry in Sri Lanka has suffered a loss of Rs 600 million due to the recent floods. A total of 26 tea factories have been reported to be damaged, out of which 14 were completely destroyed. The board added that this will affect the supply of tea. Speaking to other Derana, Deputy Minister of Plantation Industries Lakshman Vasantha Perera stated that steps will be taken to compensate the owners of small-scale tea plantations.
According to the instruction given by the Honorable Minister of Plantation Industry, Honorable Namindra Saranaike, it has been estimated 2.6 million per hectare, as well as we expect to implement a program to give assistance of 3,000 tea plants per hectare. And we expect to submit a cabinet paper regarding this matter when Honorable Minister come back to Sri Lanka. For this purpose, we have already taken an action to measure the damages in the field, and it has been estimated 4,695 million to allocate this program. We have already taken action to inform our His Excellency President and Honorable Prime Minister.
In your sports headline story, Sri Lanka is currently taking on India in the ICC Champions Trophy at the Oval in London. Having been put into bat, the defending champions India scored 321 for 6 in the 50 overs with Rohit Sharma and Shikhar Dhawan putting on a 138-run opening partnership. Dhawan top scored for India with a 128 ball, 121 runs, while both Sharma and MS Dhoni chipped in 78 and 63 respectively. In response, Sri Lanka are currently 196 for the loss of 2.
Oh, got him. Lovely from Pradeep. And that's the perennial weakness of Virat Kohli.
Taking the game away from them. And an outside edge from the captain. An easy catch to the keeper. And Sri Lanka find a way back in this game.
It's found the gap. Well played. That's going to be a boundary. And that's 4 runs. And also the 100 for Shikhar Dhawan. His 10th one-day international 100.
Strong shot. Pulled away beautifully, really timed nicely.
Very pleasant. He's a nice, upright player.
Oh, that's a fantastic shot.
Very good shot. Nothing wrong with the ball. Everything right about that shot. And it's a 50 up for the left-hander.
The Champions Trophy, Pakistan threw Group B into disarray with their 19-run win over South Africa in a rain-affected game last evening.
Having won the toss and elected to bat, the Proteas were restricted to just 219 for 8, with David Miller remaining unbeaten on 75. Hassan Ali was brilliant with the ball for Pakistan, picking up 3 for 24, while Imad Wasim and Junaid Khan took 2 wickets each. Pakistan in response got to 119 for 3 in 27 overs before rain intervened and Pakistan were awarded the win on Duckworth-Lewis method.
It's been abandoned the match.
And now we cross over to our weather center for the latest and what to expect in the next 24 hours.
Now it's another day with showers forecast in most parts of the island, and people particularly in the western, Sabragamuwa, central, southern and northwestern provinces can expect some wet weather. There may also be some strong winds of about 50 km per hour over Badulla, Ampara, Batiklo and Hambantota districts, while people in Ratnapura and Trincomalee are advised to exercise caution as thunderstorms are most likely in some areas. Let us now take a quick look at the city-by-city forecast for temperatures over the next 24 hours.
That's all from your primetime news at 9. But before we go, we'd like to bring you visuals of Anuradhapura, one of the ancient kingdoms of Sri Lanka. It was the third capital of the kingdom of Rajarata, and now it is in the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites. At present day, the city is a major attraction for tourists with its sacred sites and ancient ruins. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.
Bringing you the news and information 24 hours a day. This is Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.